From the iHeartRadio studios in New York City, come two diehard fans of the greatest rock and roll band hailing from Hollywood, California. Dissecting all things Guns N' Roses and anything else in their distorted minds, it's Brando and Scotto.
'Cause you know what the fuck you are!
And this is Appetite for Distortion.
Time to go!
And welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode 24. My name is Brando. With me, as always, is my partner in perfect crime, Scotto, Ian. What is going on, Gluteus Maximus?
That's a good one.
Thank you.
It's weird, man. This has been like a major stressful week for me. But when I hear that we get to interview Chris Webber, the guitarist for Hollywood Rose.
Oh, you mean not the guy from Michigan who called the false timeout, went on to play for the Warriors and Kings?
I had a feeling you were going to bring that up, because I remember when his name was mentioned really early on the show.
I was like, Chris Webber?
Yeah, you were
the
like
basketball
Chris Webber,
player?
Golden
Used to
State
be in
Warriors.
Guns N'
Do you have a
Roses?
Chris Webber jersey? I know you have a lot of old.
I do. I have an old school Warriors jersey, number 4, Chris Webber. Yeah,
but
I'm that cool.
I'm just so amped because we always talk about these major players in the Guns N' Roses story. Mm-hmm. And we've interviewed some really awesome people. I mean, most recently, of course, Dave Kushner, major part of the story as being the lead guitarist for Velvet. Well, rhythm guitar, Slash is, of course, the lead guitarist, but from Velvet Revolver. But Chris Webber is a guy in that we rarely hear from. We know a lot about, but I don't know what Chris Webber sounds like, so I'm psyched to be hearing from him.
And what's interesting is that before the Dave Kushner interview happened, and we were getting on certain people like Vicky Hamilton, I think we got a message saying that I want to hear from people like Dave Kushner and Chris Webber.
Yeah.
Little did I know that it would come to fruition.
All because of a certain man who joins us right now.
Who's one of our lesser... Hello. Hi, John Miller. What's going on, buddy?
I'm, just hanging out in my little hotel room here in, at the crossroads of America, the state of Indiana, the city of Lafayette.
Yeah, we have... John's calling from Lafayette. He's our official Axl Rose hometown correspondent, and he's on location. Wow, we have correspondents now, right?
I'm here.
Well, I have to say,
own assignment.
This all goes back to episode 1, because I really can't thank Jason Schultz enough for introducing us to John, and which goes into I can't thank John enough for hooking this up. You know, that we couldn't have done this just myself and Brando.
6 degrees of GNR.
Yeah.
When I was on the show with Art, I guess earlier in the spring, I think I even said out loud, maybe we could get Chris to do the show, but I think I said it a little too under my breath.
I heard you.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to see when it was appropriate, because there were certain people that we wanted to get on, and it's a unique thing what we're doing with this podcast, that we're talking to people that you may know, like Charlie Benanti, and people that fringe people you may not know. I guess maybe right. Chris Webber, or people that you really don't know that you should know, and like you, and that's what, like in art. Art's making. Right. So I want to know, like, what are you doing before we get into? Because you were just at the St. Louis show.
Right. No, I drove out. I had to go to the St. Louis show.
Oh yeah. So
there was something.
But sorry to cut you off, but before we get into that, because we have a jam-packed episode for you today, boys and girls, I do want to say a couple things. We did acknowledge it in our last summary for our last interview, that before we recorded, or I should say after we recorded is probably the proper terminology, the passing of Chester Bennington. And if you listen to this show, we're big on mental health, and we spoke a lot about Chris Cornell. So for me, Linkin Park, I haven't really spoke about them much on this show. But
no, we have,
but I guess I haven't gone in depth that during the heights of my depression, and again, we'll talk about this later, that his lyrics, his voice helped me in a lot of ways that Guns N' Roses have, and they were kind of the next generation of that band for me. So I definitely want to talk about that later, and thoughts with anyone who was affected by it. Just read a fan just killed themselves because of it. Same thing happened with Kurt Cobain. Yeah. So sorry to derail this on a sad note, but I do want to acknowledge that before we go crazy. And also the other thing that happened after our last episode was the Apollo show. which I guess we should start there, I think, because that was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? I tried getting in. Ian tried getting in. He no longer works for Sirius. Nice timing, dick face.
It doesn't mean I would have gotten in. There's very few people who got in.
What's that, John?
Did you guys go up there? Did you guys go up?
No.
I mean, yes, we're both from Long Island, but so for one, you're not going to commute from Long Island to the city just for a hope. So unless this was like the one reunion show that this was. I mean, no, spoiler alert, there was no Izzy or Steven. If I heard that was going to happen, then I would have waited and hoped for tickets.
But this is also New York City, and on top of that, this is going to be high security. There's no way you're sneaking in there or anything.
I don't mean to bear bad news, but it looked like all the fans that went up there were allowed in the show. I mean, I'm not positive, but from the GNR fan spot, I saw so many faces that did not have tickets that waited out earlier in the day, and they all got in in the first front several rows.
See, I was going to ask about that, the GNR fan spot on Facebook that we all frequent, because I kept seeing pictures of people waiting outside, and that even deterred me even more. I'm like, there's already people there. Why am I going to even bother going? So you're saying that people, I got to look into that.
I think. I'm not positive, but
right.
I know that some people
are
allowed in. And these are people that flew in from all around the country. I know there was like a group from L.A. that went out there, up from Florida. So
that's crazy.
These guys. I mean, when I heard about this show, I had already made plans to go on a family get together in North Carolina. So there was no chance. I entered a contest. I thought, hey, if I get the contest, I'll fly up for it. But it was just like the Troubadour show last year. I was away with my same, function of my family, for a get together and
fucking family. Get rid of your family. What are they doing?
Man, I can't. They always interfere at the possible moment. But
dumb family. So, I'm just kidding.
Well, and then my other fear was that Izzy and Steven were going to show. Not that I really, because I'm not. Admittedly, I want to see them in it, but I don't want Frank or Richard anything to take away from the fact that these are the players and these are my, I love this lineup. So, and they didn't. So I felt relieved. I'm like, I didn't, it went down the way it should have.
I'll be honest. Like I didn't know that there were fans who got in, but I'm just kind of puzzled. I mean, the Apollo is a really small capacity venue. I would think they sold out every seat in the house to either staff, family members and friends, or contest winners for that show before it started. I mean, that was my assumption. I was at the Metallica show at the Apollo, and it definitely worked out that way.
Yeah, because I'm thinking I might be giving too much credit to the GNR team, who was pretty smart. That maybe they left some standing room because they knew fans were going to be there. Yeah, and if you announce that, then there's a fucking problem.
If they did that, that's pretty cool.
That is cool, but I'm assuming you
waited outside.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess if you didn't experience or know about that with Metallica when you were at that Sirius show. But I guess it's a different situation. But I was reading.
I almost feel like Guns N' Roses, though, are
it's a different. Yeah,
I feel like they're kind of closer with the fans, though, than Metallica in some ways.
They really are. I mean,
really,
there is a huge following of this one specific group that I've been seeing throughout the country. That you'll notice certain faces, especially on the fan spot, and they are at every show. These people were front and center at St. Louis. I mean, these people have been going to every show for the last decade.
But I even just mean
that's new to me.
The reason I say this though is, you see people who kind of wait outside the venue. Rarely get pictures with Axl, but you'll see pictures with Duff, sometimes Slash. Right. You don't see that as much with James Hetfield or Lars. I think they actually do make a bigger effort to meet fans.
That's interesting because there are. I mean, Metallica does the meet and greet thing. I know
people who join their club, yeah.
Right? I mean, but now on that GNR fan spot, because that's in addition to my GNR, that's just been a fun thing just to watch unfold with all these diehards, especially John when you interject your Hemingway-like posts and comments. You're brilliant, man.
Well, Art's been calling me out. He'll just say, I don't know what you mean. I don't know if you're being sarcastic or you're being a dick.
I know, and I don't. But if Art's saying that, who's a professional journalist and writer, then I'm not going to fucking understand. But there, I'm like, I rip out my thesaurus. I'm like, what does John mean? But
Art knows how to mess with me, you know.
Yeah, no, Art's he's a beautiful troll.
Yeah, last on your last episode, he threw in I know he's just kidding around, but my how I approached Flash 5 or 6 years ago. That was creepy. I wasn't creepy. It wasn't. I was totally professional. If anything, I looked like the biggest goof in the world. People were imitating me as they were watching me speak to him.
Nice.
Right. So, I mean, if this is the first time you're listening to the AFD show, you want to catch up on John's episodes, talks about, meeting Slash and, possible other members of the band you have to find out, trying to, get this, your movie off the ground, which we'll get into. Because we're going to be talking to Chris Webber in just a few minutes. But the thing I did want to mention on the GNR fan spot that I'm seeing now, which is maybe the most surprising thing, you would see Axl Rose out and about overseas. And I'm talking about like signing and taking pictures with fans or, south of the border doing that, but never in America that I've seen. But I'm seeing a lot of pictures from the show that you were at at St. Louis of him smiling, taking autographs, taking pictures. So what's going on?
I don't know. All right. The show was phenomenal. It was. I felt it was an emotional show. Nick Bob introduced him saying, "It just feels just like yesterday that we were here." Got laughter throughout the crowd and throughout the night, Axl was having a great time. But he did on several events make reference that it's good to be back. And he seemed to be really grateful for the turnout. The place was jammed and everyone was loving it. And there's been so much talk for so many years about what happened in 1991, and it's been misconstrued, and there's details left out. But anyway, after the show, a friend of mine wanted me to go with her to the rear of the stadium, and next thing you know, Axl comes out. He comes out by himself with security and management, but like he came out to say hello to everyone that was waiting.
Oh wow!
And he was in a great mood. It was bizarre. I mean, I don't know what to say.
He smoked a blunt.
That's so cool, though.
I don't know.
And I assume a better mood than that video that was captured of him outside the Apollo being like, "Get the fuck out of my way."
Oh yeah, that was night and day. But those assholes deserve this.
Yeah.
Like harassing him like that.
And actually, this goes back to the Chester Bennington thing, which we'll get more into. But I do think in this day and age of paparazzi and people just filming videos, like there really is no just giving people their personal space anymore.
No.
And people just don't have the decency to say this guy just finished performing, maybe not get right in his way right now. And the reason I bring up Chester is that like the day that he died, they're like, DJ from Linkin Park arrives at Chester Bennington's home. Like, do you really think at that moment he wants to see you from TMZ up in his face? Like, this is not the right time. And people can say all they want, like, oh, they're a celebrity, they signed up for this.
No, they didn't.
Yeah,
we made that unwritten rule. No, it's absolutely sick, and it does bother me. But I want to get both of your guys' opinions on this. What do you think? Because you can say the narrative on who Axl Rose has changed over the last several years with the No Meltdowns and the reunion and everything. So when that video came out of an angry Axl, I was actually expecting a lot of comments of people saying, "Oh, back to his old angry self." But everything was not just like the biased fan sites would say, "Good for him, good for Axl standing up." I was like, "Whoa, Axl seems to be he's changed, and even when he's angry, he's doing it justifiably."
Well, I think the circumstances were appropriate for people to be on his side.
Right, but you know how people twist shit. You know what I mean? People twist shit all the time.
Yeah, but I think that like the video footage, it was really hard to see it any other way. That he was literally being just ambushed by autograph hounds and cameras. I do think he's changed. He's not changed. He's a different guy, but
matured.
It's a different world, and Well,
I want to get also. Well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I I just I'm sorry to cut you off because I want to make sure I get your thoughts on this too before we speak to Chris. What that article that came out about why you should hate Axl if he was like in the St. Louis Gazette or whatever.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, tell us about that.
I didn't even read it. I don't know
okay. You saw the headline? Because I saw you fighting on the comments. Sorry to talk over you, but I saw you guys fighting in the comments about it.
I probably, I admit, I didn't read it.
Okay.
But just the intention to do it is just a pathetic, opportunistic, is a pathetic opportunity for somebody to draw attention to themselves and look like a real ass. I mean, we're talking about an incident 26 years ago. And like the fact that they're here and it's a gesture of civility, and you should have seen the show. I mean, there was no like it was a great, humble, sincere, honest performance.
That's awesome.
And everyone felt it. Even the guy Stump, the guy that was taking pictures back in the day, he was there that night.
I saw articles about that.
I did too. What?
Yeah, trying to draw attention to himself, but like, whatever. I mean, like, fuck that guy.
I hear you. I hear it.
He was in the wrong. If you watch all the footage from back in the day, he was a member of that security team. He was off that night, but that whole team was taking total advantage of their position, messing with people in the crowd, bothering Axl throughout the night, and doing nothing. And there was a strict rule about no photography. And then nobody would do anything. So I think I like Axl said, he probably could have handled it in a different way, but I don't know what way that was if no one was doing anything. So he took it upon himself, and he didn't hit the guy. He tackled him, and then he gave like the little security guard like a little, like one of my friends calls it a cuff. He cuffed him in the forehead. That doesn't hurt. It's like a wrestling move. It's sort of saying, "Wake up, guy!" Like,
yeah,
okay.
But either way, this is a kindler, gentler Axl Rose that we're seeing in some ways.
So. That's too funny. I do want to, because it's great because you're getting. I mean, of course, they're going to be the bad people out there still trying to get stir negative press for themselves, or people who don't fully buy it. Before we get Chris
like
on,
like AlternativeNation.com.
Well, they're good to us.
Out.
So no,
they're good. I understand. Like,
they're good to us.
I understand exposure is good. I mean, I believe in it. It's just unfortunate that there's the other side to them that like they are admitted leeches, and they will spread around false rumors and whatnot just to get attention and take advantage of the fans, and it is good. I want you guys to get the exposure, but anyways, like that is a site as long as well as this other YouTube thing called GNR Central, who just spreads nonsense. They don't go at any show, and they just get secondhand information, so anyway.
Hey, I'm personally for any site that wants to write about us and give us proper credit.
And I will have to give corrected credit to, I believe it's Ultimate Guitar, whoever Axl Rosenberg writes for, and I thought that was
it Metal Sucks?
Maybe it was Metal Sucks. You're right. Axl Rosenberg. He initially credited Ultimate Guitar, I think, for the Dave Kushner interview, and then I tweeted at him or whatever, private message him. I was like, "No, it's us, and then he fixed it. So I
shout out to Metal
that.
Sucks as well.
Yeah, so I do appreciate that. And as we're waiting for Chris to call any second, I do want to give my friend who did go to. I have several friends who went to the Apollo show.
Lucky bastards.
I mean, they all know me and my passion, but they were all like, it was all top secret and how they can get in through somebody else. But my friend who happened to go, she wasn't actually that excited. She just went for the experience. First time seeing GNR, and she's my age, like the early 30s. She left like that was one of the top 5 concerts I've ever seen. And this girl goes to concerts like legends. Yeah. She's like, Axl, his voice was on point. I'm shocked. And I thought it was funny. He's like, oh, he was not as puffy as I thought. I was like, okay, thanks.
And especially those Photoshop pictures that people keep throwing around trying to justify their rude comments.
Oh yeah,
he was thin. Like the other night, when he came out, it was funny. Like he'd switch to a pair of shorts, and he was just sort of like in like a workout kind of gear. And he's a thin guy.
I mean, he's like Slash, where, and I'm saying it as me, you know, he's got a little bit of a dad bod, but it's not like he's still in shape. He's not like the Axl Rose coming out in bicycle shorts. I mean, the dude's 50, but he looks good. He's not the supposed fat Axl that everyone thinks he is.
Yeah, and he dresses appropriately for his size.
He does.
I was going to throw this out there.
He's not Vince Neil. You see Vince Neil recently?
Yeah.
He is having. He's Octomom.
I'll tell you, I was going to throw out there, and look, I'd love to have him on the show. I'm not trying to be insulting, so if anybody happens to hear this, I'm just being honest. So I saw LA Guns recently, and Phil Lewis wears like the high cut T-shirt, and it's just not flattering on him.
Bill Corgan does the same thing.
Yeah, which is funny though, because
you need a stylist.
Tracy Guns looks excellent, and he looks fine. Phil Lewis, I was just like, not the most flattering outfit, dude.
I'm going to try to see them. They're going to be on Wednesday night.
They're great.
In the city.
They're great. That's why I want to throw out there I'm not being a hater, because I don't like the haters out there. It was a great performance. The current lineup kicks ass, and most importantly to me, you could tell they're having a really fun time playing with each other, and this is not just a cash grab or something. You know, I know Tracy Guns did not get along with the classic drummer of the lineup, so they got rid of him. So it seems like because of that, these guys are able to play together. And I think they truly squashed the beef, because up there they're just having a fun time and putting on an excellent performance. So and we'd love to get Tracy Guns on the show. I think you'll have a great time.
And I want to talk to Chris Webber about Tracy, because they went to high school together.
So with that, we couldn't be more excited to have Chris Webber joining us by phone. And just to give some background here, I feel like anybody who's really followed this band and has read up on their history knows this, but prior to Guns N' Roses, there were two bands on the scene. There was Hollywood Rose, and then after that, LA Guns. Those two bands kind of merged and formed what we call Guns N' Roses, but the original guitarist, before you ever heard of Slash and before Tracy Guns was even in a band with Axl Rose officially, Hollywood Rose, the original guitarist, was Chris Webber, and we're just so excited to hear the full story, because you're a guy that is often speculated upon and people are writing about, but you're not someone that we really hear from. You're like behind the scenes at this point in the game.
Yeah, I get, I've been able to sort of support, that band through some interviews over the years. A couple books and some radio stuff. But they've done a great job there on their own. They don't, my input is, cursory.
But that history is still, that history is important, but I want to get into kind of who Chris Webber is. And I said jokingly before we got on the air, but I want you still to verify it. You are not the basketball player that used to play for the Warriors and call that infamous timeout for Michigan. I know, I kid. I think he has an extra B. Not like, because the major difference is you're not like a 6'4" black guy. I'm aware of that.
Well, I do. If I had an extra B in my name, I would try to cash his checks.
That's smart.
But I don't. I'm only one B.
Okay.
People do give me a timeout signal when they hear my name a couple times a year still. So
I'm glad I'm in terrible company. But I want to know more about you, about as far as where you grew up and how you got into the music scene. Just to give some background about who you are.
Sure. Well, I'm from Los Angeles, in the Hollywood Hills. I was playing guitar since age 9, thanks to my mom. We knew a couple professional musicians that took an interest in kind of helping me through. We were friends with some of the guys in the band War, that sort of wanted to help me out. So got a guitar at 9. Did a couple lessons, didn't really sort of take to instruction, was more like just sort of learning on my own a bit more. By the time I was 14, I was in some, playing in more. Actually, by the time I was 10, we had a little band going, which is my first sort of experience sort of playing in front of crowds.
What was the name of your band at 10 years old?
It was called Plus 4.
Well, can you sue Mark Hoppus?
PLUS.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I thought it was like Plus 44, that Mark Hoppus band.
No.
Okay.
Maybe they stole my name. It was a good name.
Oh, maybe. Okay. I was hoping it was like Muppet Babies from Hell or something like really infant.
No.
All right, never mind. Continue. Sorry, I have Tourette's.
That's all right. There were 4 of us, so we kind of had that was the inspiration. But anyway, so, garage bands until, through 14 and 15. And then I, hung out at the Troubadour here in Los Angeles, a pretty popular venue, live music venue.
Of course.
A lot of rock. Sorry?
No, I said of course. I mean, skipping ahead, but it's where the infamous reunion took place because of all the history there with you and what went on to be Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, I mean, spent a lot of time in front of the Troubadour, inside the Troubadour, in front of the Troubadour, socializing, with the community. We were, 83, 84 was, glam was, we were a glam band. And, we would spray our hair, long hair, sprayed straight up. You can see it in the pictures still, early GNR stuff. Mm-hmm. And, stiletto boots and, tight jeans. And, it was good, So spent a lot of time doing that. I was friends with Tracy Guns, who I went to school with, to Fairfax High. Mm-hmm. And him and I, we had a couple really fun years sort of getting, into like 16 years old. We were sort of, he was driving and we were going, hitting the beach a lot and going out to venues and stuff. So anyway, I think he did have a band, and I kind of said, listen, if you ever want to, another guitar player, I'd be happy to kind of come down and jam with you guys. And so he came up to me one day and goes, listen, I met this guy, and I'd like to introduce him to you. I said, okay. So, we used to go to the Rainbow a lot, but at 16, I spent most of my time in the parking lot, which was, if you talk to anybody from that age, you'll know that the parking lot was really, just as important as inside. Everybody at 2 o'clock would roll out to the parking lot, then the next hour and a half sort of hooking up with, the opposite sex or, going out to parties afterwards. So,
sure.
So that's where you would go. So anyway, I didn't get in a lot because of my age. I would sneak in occasionally and they were really kind of nice to me once I got in, didn't embarrass me kicking me out, but they were good guys. But in any case, so one time at the Rainbow, Tracy said this to me, and I said, okay, I'd like to meet this guy. So he introduced. So we went to his where his truck was, and he introduced me to Izzy, who at the time was Jeff. So said, you guys are both guitar players, and I know you're both looking for bands. Why don't you guys talk? So that night, I talked to Izzy probably, I don't know, couple hours, talking about bands we liked and sort of directions, and what he wanted.
And if you don't mind me asking, like, who were some of those bands? Who were the bands who influenced you to play guitar and that you and Izzy bonded on?
Let me think. I don't, I grew up listening to Zeppelin. At the early 80s, I was listening, Judas Priest was important to me at that time. I listened to a lot of Rush, although, my style isn't, Rush-like. Rock bands, Motorhead.
Aerosmith.
Aerosmith, yeah, probably the most influential to my musical style of writing is Aerosmith, although I don't think I play anything like Joe Perry.
It makes sense, though, because you definitely hear that Aerosmith vibe in, what would later become Guns N' Roses and even covering Aerosmith.
And even the Juju Hounds, a lot of it, that's what I would think of Aerosmith. So that makes a lot of sense. That's what you guys bonded over.
Well, Chris, did
sorry, is that John?
Yes, it is. John's still here. Go ahead, John.
Did he play Hanoi Rocks for you that night?
Well, yeah. I mean, as I was going to go on, yeah. So what I was going to say is that part of what Izzy really wanted was to have a band that looked like he had this image of what the band would look like. And in LA at the time, there was a lot of glam, but there was also a lot of metal. And I, personally have never owned a pair of spandex. I've never owned a spiked bracelet.
You just rented.
I just wouldn't. I couldn't. I felt embarrassed in them. They just weren't my style. Now that's coming from a guy that had bleached white hair and pink lipstick on stage, but the black spandex wasn't my style at all.
We all have our limits. We all have it.
Right. I mean, I got to draw the line somewhere. So, and the guys that looked like that actually got more girls than the more metal guys. But in any case, Izzy, made it clear that he wanted this particular image, and I knew of Hanoi Rocks just from being, from being around, around the scene, especially because of the image. I didn't really know what they sounded like. So anyway, Izzy talked a lot about how he wanted this band to be styled in the same sort of styling. And I don't think he was necessarily copying Hanoi Rocks, but you can see early on that there's a lot of influence. I mean, there's Andy McCoy written all over some of the earlier pictures.
That's so interesting that, Hanoi Rocks is a band that it's true, you don't hear their music so often. They never had a major hit, but for some reason, the image of that band influenced all these bands that we listen to today. You're talking about early Guns N' Roses or Hollywood Rose at the time, and people say, Motley Crue during that Theater of Pain era, after the death of Razzle, of course, which was, due to Vince Neil's Motley Crue, people say that image was directly taken from Hanoi Rocks. So there was definitely something to that image.
Yeah, I would say that's correct. I felt that the first, maybe I just see it this way, but the first band to really go out there and kind of push that was Hollywood Rose. And there were likely other bands, and certainly within that year, there were other bands, and I'm sure we didn't inspire other bands to be like that image-wise as young of a band as we were at the time. But that was just sort of popping off. So we were doing that at a time where, most, like I was saying, most guys were like, spandex and, sort of, more tough looking. So even Quiet Riot, if you look back at that time, it really wasn't glam so much. It was kind of that rock striped shirt look, So in any case, that's how I remember it. And so anyway, Izzy was, that was a big issue for him. He really wanted that to happen. So, that made sense to me. I like that. I like that whole look. So, started to sort of formulate what the band would look like at the same time as what it would sound like.
Yeah, I remember that. That's one thing I thought was really interesting is that you noted how it wasn't an issue of whether or not Izzy could play, but he had a great look, and he wanted the band to have this look. Everything was about the look.
That sounds like Nikki Sixx.
Yeah.
John, that sounds like the same thing that Nikki Sixx wants.
Well, it's funny that we throw that all in there because, if you watch that Behind the Music of Motley Crue, they talk about Vince Neil, and he's like, I didn't care if he could sing. I knew the girls went wild over how he looked, and he was able to command that stage, and we knew we wanted this guy. So I think that was, indicative at the time, and maybe they don't talk about it as much today, but the image of the band is extremely important.
Right. Yeah.
We used to have this newspaper here in LA, the Recycler.
Yep.
And you'd look in the Recycler for band members, and every time you would look, there would be something that in the ad or the wanted would say drummer wanted, no short hairs.
Right.
Short hairs.
or must have a great look. No mustaches. Doesn't talk about how well they play. Doesn't talk about what their style is.
That was big at the time, or even before then. I remember, I always go back to other bands here, but like Paul Stanley talked about he didn't like seeing bands that had beards at the time. It was like no facial hair. That was big back then.
This sounds like rock and roll Tinder. before, you know, like nobody gives a shit to read like the bio. It's just like, oh, what do you look like? Swipe, swipe, swipe. So then Chris, let me ask you, because you went to school with Tracy. Was it before or after / tried out for Poison, and he didn't want to do that look that maybe you had met him? Was that also through the recycler? I'm trying to figure out the timeline here.
Well, when he tried out for Poison, I also tried out for Poison. So I think that's at a time that Tracy was in the band, because I wasn't in the band any longer, but I was in that scene, and I already had my sort of rock chops going. And if Slash did it as well, he either was playing in Hollywood Rose and then sort of just went to go see if Poison was a good option for him, or it's during the time that Tracy was playing, which would make more sense to me. I never really thought of it.
Well, that's interesting, because I've been wanting to ask you about this too. Tracy was a part of Hollywood Rose for a period?
By my calculations, yeah. I think I see some flyers. I mean, his L.A. Guns was not, Axl was not L.A. Guns. L.A. Guns was a different band. Tracy connected with Axl and played in what I thought was Hollywood Rose.
I thought it was called, because I watched the documentary that you're in, Axl Rose, The Prettiest Star, that there was a band called Rose first, and they had to change it to Hollywood. Is that what is? Maybe that's the time period?
Yeah, no, we just changed it. We changed it because the band was originally called AXL, and this is when we were still calling Axl Bill, and we called it AXL, and I never liked the name, and I don't think Izzy liked the name, but Axl really wanted it. So we, at some date, something happened, and we were kind of like, you know what, we're out of here. We had a little bit of leverage, Izzy and I, from something that happened. I can't even remember what, but we said, listen, we'll keep the band together, but we got to change the name. And Axl was fine with it, I guess. I can't even remember if he put up much resistance. But anyway, we called it Rose, and we did a lot of shows under the name Rose. I still got a couple Troubadour tickets with them.
Oh man, I bet those would go on eBay for quite a pretty penny.
Those are his emotional possessions.
Yeah,
why would you try to sell his? Don't do that to him.
You know what? I think there's a picture on the Cleopatra Records thing. I think I gave them one, which they scanned. But in any case, it was a Spinal Tap moment where we did a sort of a search, and we saw another band called Rose. And if you've seen Spinal Tap, they were going like, we were the
sure
whatevers, and then we were the new whatevers. Screw it.
Hilarious.
So we like, well, we're Hollywood Rose. That's how the name came about.
Okay.
So if we could back up here a bit, you talked about meeting Izzy, bonding on bands and the look and everything. At what point does Axl enter the picture and that you get introduced to Axl Rose?
I think at the time Izzy was living really close to the Coconut Teaser. So most of the time that I was hanging out with him, I would go see him at his house. Probably within a week, maybe, and we were writing songs pretty much every day.
Was Axl playing in Rapid Fire at this point?
You know what? I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't even hear of Rapid Fire, to be honest with you, until maybe 10 years ago. So me and Izzy had done this kind of week-long sort of just jamming and stuff like that at his pad, and he said, listen, I got my friend is in town, and I don't know if Axl was out of town or maybe he was at home for a while and then flying out. But he said, let's go meet him. He's our singer, basically.
Before you even hear him, he's our singer. So you had no say.
I mean, the music didn't matter to Izzy. It was just the look. So I figured, why break with tradition and start worrying about, who the singer is? Let's just assume that Izzy has a good eye for it. So anyway, I went to, and I've said this before in some books and things like that. But in any case, I went to an apartment on Whitley, above Franklin in Hollywood, very old, an area with a lot of very old, very cool old buildings, and went up the type of elevator where you got to close the gate, and went up to the top floor, and got out, and as I looked across the rooftop, in the sort of the other corner was this really white figure, and walked over to him, and I entered in, and Izzy said, "This is Bill," and he was sunning himself, he was tanning, and that was it. That's when I first met him.
I always picture that. I mean, like with that guy, that pale skin, he must have been frying up there.
Yeah, I don't know why I always remember it that way, but it must have left some sort of mark, because I remember, because I was I was trying to figure out what this person looked like from a distance, but I only could see the illuminating whiteness of them.
Yeah. I mean, a rooftop in LA in I guess the springtime, that is some serious sun.
So what was your first impression, I guess, first of all, on the look, since Izzy said this guy has the look for the band, and then at what point did you first hear the voice out of Bill at the time, and what was your impression of that?
I was perfectly fine with, because it was Izzy, and I thought, even by this point, I thought Izzy was the coolest thing in the world. So, he could have, he could have said, we're gonna be in a polka band, and I'd be like, all right. So,
polka's very underrated.
It is. I think, I can't remember exactly, but we started to jam, and there was some low tones. I've never heard the Rapid Fire record, but I hear it as kind of more of a sort of a traditional sounding singer vibe that he had. I don't know if that's correct, but he was kind of doing that. But when he started to go to this sort of his Axl voice, it was like, wait, you got to sing every song just like that.
Yeah.
And he may have already been doing that, and it may just be sort of just a circumstance that he wasn't doing that day. But when that happened, it was like, that this is going to be great. This is awesome.
Did you think he was going to be something huge at that point, or were you just like, man, this guy's got a really unique voice?
You know what? I was 16. I didn't think of, huge for me was, so far removed. I mean, I had Zeppelin posters on my wall. I was never going to be, and anybody I ever knew was never going to be Zeppelin. You know what I mean? So, but I thought that this is going to be something that is, that I would like to be connected to. And again, I was saying, I was listening to Judas Priest earlier, in the years before, and people that could scream were, with a good screamy voice and not some crappy scream, were impressive back then,
And you are connected now, because as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of Appetite for Destruction, you're credited for co-writing Anything Goes. So can you take us through the songwriting process? Who brought the lyrics to the table, the music? How did Anything Goes happen?
I think Izzy and I were listening to a lot of Aerosmith, and I think Rock in a Hard Place had just come out just around that time. Listening to a lot of that, and it just sort of felt, I felt some of the vibe that was giving off kind of inspired some of my writing. And I think Move to the City is a good example of, a riff that I wrote that has
love that tune.
It's got that sort of same type of vibe. And, our songwriting was pretty much always the same. I would typically, this is how I remember it, that the songs that I composed with them, I would bring a riff to the table. Me and and then me and Izzy would work on it, and we would record our parts. Right, there were no drums or anything. We didn't have any small studio at that time, not even a 4-track, but just record it onto a tape, a cassette tape, and then give it to Axl, and Axl would go away with it, and he'd go away with it for any number of days until he came back and says, okay, I've got lyrics to it. And then we would all play 2 guitars and the vocals. And then we slowly start to put together a band. In fact, when we did the demo tape that Cleopatra Records released, the 5 songs, we didn't have a drummer at the time. We didn't have a band. It was me, Axl and Izzy solely. And we had to find a drummer that came in and kind of learn those songs, which is Johnny Christ, at kind of on the day. I don't know. Maybe we got him a tape couple days before, but it was pretty quick. So, but the songwriting again, just the sort of was my bringing it forward, me and Izzy working on it, and then Axl getting a tape and then writing the lyrics. There are certainly songs that Izzy just wrote and then Axl just wrote, that of our sets that we were playing at the time. They never quite made it to the records, I don't think. And with those ones, they would bring me and say, "This is the song," and I'd create an arrangement over the top.
So would that be the case? Because we mentioned Anything Goes and Move to the City. What about Reckless Life and Shadow of Your Love as well? I mean, these are great tunes. So you are a part of the history. And before I even knew, the other Chris Webber, I'm rocking out to these tunes. So it's not even like I'm blowing smoke. So I want to know those. I want to know more about some of my favorite GNR tunes.
Oh, thanks. Man, it's a long time. But I mean, that was the songwriting process. So I don't really remember the day that particular song came up. But those songs, Reckless Life, at least, Anything Goes, and then the other ones off of that Cleopatra tape were the original. Were some of the original songs that we wrote. And without having a band, we'd written more after after we put a band together to kind of start playing out live.
So here's the thing. These songs have lived on long, long after your time in the band with Hollywood Rose, working with Axl, working with Izzy. I'm just wondering, at what point does Tracy Guns come into the picture as the guitarist for this band, and how did the story end up going that you were no longer with them? Because this is a pretty, even though these songs are huge and we all remember them, this is a pretty short span of time.
And I'm reading, and I know Wikipedia is always correct, that Axl fired you and replaced you with Slash. Is that correct?
I mean, that's not the way I remember it. But
Wikipedia is wrong. Oh my God! This is the first time for everything. So so I guess to jump on what Ian was saying, I guess the demise of Hollywood Rose and your exit and what happened.
I think the specifics, I mean, it's by perception and it changes over time, and even one person's view may change in the light of other information. But the way I remember is we played the Music Machine here it was in Santa Monica, and California, just connected, part of Los Angeles, and with Stryper, if you guys remember the band Stryper.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Still touring today.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Michael. We were talking about this. Sorry to deviate for a second. Eddie Trunk had on Michael Sweet recently, or he has him on a lot.
Yeah.
And Michael Sweet's super active.
Very.
Like, he's touring. Even on Twitter.
Did an album with George Lynch from Dokken.
Yeah, and somebody asked, like, "Oh, what's going on with Michael Sweet?" And Eddie went on some complete, rant.
Oh yeah,
and
he was
freaking
fired up.
Yeah, just like, how are you fans of these bands and not know about like what's going on with them at the time? So that's why we enjoy. Yes, everyone knows what's currently going on with GNR because they're back in the limelight. We dig deeper because we're nerds, but that's why it's just funny you mentioned Michael Sweet because he's alive. He's alive.
It was him, it was those guys, and then wasn't there brothers in there anyway? And then
Michael Sweet, and his brother is the drummer.
Yeah, and then there was the other guitar player was Oz or something. Ozzy.
Yeah, and they're still touring with the original lineup. Yeah, back to what you were. And
I'm Jewish. I'm afraid of getting a Bible thrown at me, so that's why I don't go.
I mean, I don't. Not to say anything negative about Stryper. I don't remember them being very being great role models backstage.
Oh, okay.
That's some dirt right there.
Because I just mentioned that my terrible joke clearly went over his head, saying that I'm Jewish and I don't want to go to these shows by having Bibles thrown at me because they.
Oh, is that what they do? They throw a Bible? Well,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then there's an infamous story that when they opened for Anthrax, the crowd was throwing the Bibles back at them.
I like that.
Oh, my God.
It reminds me of my band U.P.O. when we played, and the Slipknot fans sat on the floor and looked away from us during the whole set. I thought that was nice.
Ooh, really?
Slipknot fans have a tendency to kind of like, unless it's Slipknot, they kind of turn the other direction and sit there.
At some point, were you like, I played with fucking Axl Rose, goddammit, show me some respect?
My U.P.O. was a great band. We had a lot of success for a couple of years, and anyway, I know it's not a U.P.O.
Sure, yeah, no, we'll get into U.P.O. and I don't want to.
U.P.O. was awesome.
We were listening to it on before, and John can verify. We were listening to some U.P.O. So
Yeah,
let's just mention it now, so it's not weird.
Sure,
know?
I mean, U.P.O. is excellent. I do want to get into it, but I just want to make sure we get back into the departure story because this is important.
We're all over the place, Chris. If you haven't noticed.
The best memory that I have, we played that show at the Music Machine. Axl got pissed off. I think I bumped into him on stage. I can't remember exactly. It's something like that. And it was like, fuck it, we're going to end this is where I'm leaving. So he essentially left. At the time that he left is when within that period of time is when me and Izzy moved to the city. Because Axl wasn't part of it. But in any case, from my memory, he did connect with Tracy at that time, and I think he was living at Raz's house, which is a friend of Tracy's, who kind of helped LA Guns kind of get off the ground financially and with his support. So I think Axl was connected via that, and obviously Tracy was kind of connected to everybody, considering he introduced me to Izzy, and he was just an all-around good guy. He kind of was around a lot. So they were playing. So we had all kind of disbanded. I didn't feel fired because we weren't together as a band anymore. Fired would be they continue playing and then just have somebody else come in.
Okay.
But so I think Slash was in the band so Izzy would have played, and then Slash would have joined, and then Slash couldn't play because he had to work one night for this particular show. So that's when I came back and played again with them, and that's when we played the show at Dancing Waters in San Pedro, California.
Was that a New Year's Eve show or something?
I think so. The way I remember, I don't remember exactly the date, but that was my memory of it. Was like a New Year's Eve show.
All right. And Steve Darrow was on bass then, wasn't he?
Yep, and Rob Gardner, the drummer from the LA Guns, the original LA Guns.
Right.
Drummer.
So cool, man. It's great getting into all this history. I don't know if this is the same point you were about to express, Ian. Then I want to know how, whether it disbanded, you joined for that one show. So what happened during the time period where they're forming that band, and then you have to decide to form this other band, U.P.O.? So that time period.
U.P.O. is decades later.
Right. So, I mean, I know we're filling in decades, so I want to know, I guess, I know it wasn't immediately after. But, what was that whole process, I guess, of what happened, and you're looking for another band, and I guess that whole time period, because we want to know what your life was like during that tenure where GNR was forming.
Sure. So, late 80s, I went, from then I went to New York for a little bit, lived in New York with some friends, New York and New Jersey for about, a year until it got winter, and then it was too cold, and so I came home. And just played in a bunch of sort of Hollywood bands. Didn't really get my groove going again until much later. I was in a band called Lunatic Fringe. I was in some other bands that were Hollywood bands, and it was fun, but there wasn't any big push behind any of them. Everybody back then, if you talk to anybody from then that was a musician, that say, the story would be, we got a demo tape. We have a lawyer who's in the music industry. He's going to get us signed. And that's a common story. So everybody sort of had this sort of this music attorney that was going to make the deal for them that knew people. So bands would play Hollywood and the Strip, and in hopes of drawing large crowds, and then getting a record company guy to come down and see them. Then you would do showcases and blah 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 blah. So
I want to back it up a little bit, because I feel like your story is almost similar to Dave Mustaine, who wrote some of the songs on Metallica's Kill 'Em All. You wrote stuff that appeared on Appetite for Destruction. Now, I know Appetite for Destruction wasn't an overnight success, as some people often think. It took a little bit for the album to gain traction. But I'm wondering, once Appetite for Destruction becomes a worldwide success, you have songs on that album. We know Dave Mustaine, when he was kicked out of Metallica, he had major depression for years about this. Like, if you watch Some Kind of Monster, it's something that he really never got over.
He cried.
Yeah, I'm wondering if your experience was in any way similar when you watch these guys that you came up with go on to make, what some would call the biggest rock album of all time. I just wonder what it's like not getting to be a part of that, even though you were an instrumental part of songs on there.
Yeah, well, I didn't have depression, so I didn't, that it didn't hit me in the same way that it would have hit Dave. I think one of the things is that I don't look at it necessarily that I wrote a song on there. I felt like I sort of helped create it from from this sort of infantile sort of beginnings, and certainly the other guys, Slash did, the next step. But from the very sort of foundation of it, sort of was part of that. And I'm kind of more proud of that than just the songs or together, that I had maybe a good instinct to do that. But in any case, I just kind of just went with the flow. I mean, there were a lot of people that were, I didn't let anybody really know. I didn't really have anybody to tell. There was times in my life where I wasn't really hanging around any musicians. I kind of let it just sort of be. I think that there was, when Geffen called me and they said, there were some dealings with Geffen around the songwriting and the publishing and all that. Then it became a little bit more real, and that's when they were sort of really making a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But even then, those were times in my life that I have to be honest, they were pretty nuts, and sort of I wasn't always very present, put it that way. I think I weathered it pretty well, to be honest with you.
Well, I'll tell you, like, one of the things that I remember the first time that I spoke with you, I guess it was about 7 years ago, I asked you generally the same question. I'll never forget what you said to me. You said, hey, Slash is awesome. And I thought that was the coolest attitude. It wasn't like regret or anything. Like, it was praise of him and what he did and what the record is. And I really love that.
That made me think, didn't Pearl Jam, when they were just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they wanted like every single drummer who's ever been a part of that band to be in the Hall of Fame? And you are a part of GNR's history, not just Hollywood Rose. You're on Appetite. Did it ever cross your mind that maybe I should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as well?
No, it hasn't. But
all right.
Well, it's funny because I sent Chris a text that night of the show, and I said, you should be a part of this. And I think you had lost my contact. You said, who is this? I'm like,
new phone, who dis?
Right, and I said, it's John Miller. You're like, oh, hey, John, cheers. Hell yeah, whatever.
Hilarious. No, it's just a thought.
I think everybody played a part, and I think it's all important. And, I'm not going to... I think I'm humble enough to sort of recognize that, the components of that band that made it were probably needed to be exactly how they were in order for that to happen. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know if I had the riff, and I know I didn't have the riff for Sweet Child of Mine. I might have had other riffs that might have been awesome as well, but that particular riff I didn't have, or Welcome to the Jungle. And if those are the two particular songs that elevated them, it may not have happened with me. So,
That's fair to say, but there's so many people who feel like that album is one of the few albums where start to finish, front to back, they could listen to it and just enjoy that experience and get sucked into this album and escape whatever's going on in their life. And listeners have been doing so for 30 years. So you're a part of it.
I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And I will say this is true. Whenever I'm not lazy and I try to work out, Anything Goes is on my playlist. It's like, I think it's one of the most underrated tracks. I love that tune. So again, you're part of it. So it's just a thought. You never know. Or, that whole Hall of Fame thing was a catastrophe regardless. But maybe we could have been invited, but I know the GNR temperature was pretty cold in the room that night anyway. So again, just a thought. But since your thought process is so healthy, and there's a reason why I say that. I've talked in this show about me being in therapy. I've been in therapy for 6 years. I guess got to refill my Cymbalta, my antidepressants. We've talked about Chris Cornell on the show with Dave Kushner. Actually, quick sidebar: did you also go to high school with Dave as well? John and I weren't sure of that.
But you went to Fairfax.
Okay, so you went to high school with Dave Kushner then?
Yeah, but I don't think I knew him. I don't know if it was the same year or not.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, what is it? The water in Fairfax? What's like? It breeds rock stars. But just to continue, so we spoke about the death of Chris Cornell, and in addition, just talking all nerdy about this band, Guns N' Roses. We like the music and all the players involved, but we talk about the emotions, what it does to us. And I'm a big proponent of mental health, trying to get it out there, and seeing recently what happened to Chester Bennington so soon after Chris Cornell, and learning that you are now a therapist. I want to make sure I get the proper title. So I wanted to know how that came about, because you hear of rock stars, of course, being in therapy. I think we can make the argument that this genre of music that we're all a fan of may need therapy the most, or our lyrics are the most therapeutic. I probably is a better way to explain it. So how did you become a therapist? Because I think that's an interesting story to me.
I had mentioned that there was some troubled times. So I had some substance abuse issues and alcohol issues, and
me too.
Into my 30s, from my late teens through my 30s, and U.P.O. had released No Pleasantries and did really well. Hang on one second, I'm just going to talk to my daughter real quick.
I'll
go
good.
for it. Sorry. So,
which daughter?
Yeah.
Which I don't want to take away from your family. Did she?
Beatrice, the 5-year-old.
Oh, okay. Okay, she doesn't need help with her math homework at that age. Okay.
Do you want to say hi? You want to say hi to everybody? Hey. No, she doesn't.
Future rock star, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, and the the U.P.O. record was doing pretty well. We were kind of high on the. We were, I think, number 3 on active rock charts with Godless. And anyway, it was a crazy year. So when I got off the road, I kind of imploded and needed to go away for a little bit. So I went to treatment and got sober. That was nearly 16 years ago now.
Congratulations, Mazel Tov.
Thanks.
It's been about this December will be 2 years since I've drank.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
Good job. The second U.P.O. record by Sony Epic didn't do as well, and sort of couldn't turn it into the sort of machine that we had originally thought. One of the reasons is our A&R guy Steve Richards died, and that was a real very tragic thing, and it sort of took the wind out of our sails. But the second record didn't do quite as well. It was my choice to I needed to get a job while we were waiting for the second record to come out, even in the first place. So I got a job at the only thing I could do, which is to answer phones, because there's not too many jobs for guitar players waiting to do their next record.
Right.
So I got a job answering phones at the treatment program I went through, and then went on the road. Then took a kind of hiatus from that program, from the job to go back and support the second record. Well, when the second record didn't hit, I was at a crossroads, and I said, you know what? I kind of like being in that environment at that program. So I went back, and I after a short period of time, entered a different area of the program where I was talking more with people and families. And then I just went back to school, and I said, what I really want to do is kind of help people and be part of their success. And so I went back to school, did my master's, and blah, blah, blah. So just ended up being a therapist.
That's cool, man. That's a great story. And the thing that's interesting is that you talk about during U.P.O. that it brought you into this downward spiral, and people would probably think seeing Guns N' Roses' success might have brought you there, but it was something later on. We touched on it a little bit earlier. The formation.
Mind you, it's within saying that during the success that they had, I was out of my mind. So
got you. So it all accumulated kind of,
or it wasn't even like registering with you. You were just dealing with your own demons. It sounds like.
Look, I could analyze myself, but having grown up in an alcoholic household, I was really good at sort of shutting down emotions anyway. So when this feeling, which would have been sort of like resentment towards them, or to have anything, or jealousy or whatever, it was all kind of muted anyway. So I just wasn't.
She's angry about it.
Yeah.
Those are some pretty big Legos she's playing with.
No, we'll let you settle whatever's going on.
No, I like it.
Anyway, so yeah, that's how I got into doing that.
Okay. No, and forgive, because I mean, I again, it affects me personally, and that's how one of the reasons why I'm into Guns N' Roses so much. So I look at Scott Weiland, even though it was not an official suicide. I mean, it can be looked at like he was just trying to kill himself slowly. So these are things that we've spoken about the show, because we pride ourselves in just kind of expanding the rock and roll palette, why we like this band, why we like this genre more than most. So I guess you being on both sides of it, being I argue a successful musician, and now being a therapist, what do you make of how fans treat their idols?
How fans treat their idols? Well, I mean, there's two things that come to mind. One, famous American by the name of Super Chicken. If you guys ever watched that cartoon.
Say a super what? What was it called?
Super Chicken.
Super Chicken.
Super Chicken.
No,
you have to be my age.
Oh, I know Cow and Chicken.
But Super Chicken was known for saying you knew the job was dangerous when you took it.
Mm.
So in some respects, it's like, while they don't say it on the front end, and when they're saying, I want to be a rock star or a rap star or whatever, they're only like, I want to have money and admiration, and I want to get my music out to more people so that they can appreciate it too. I'm not just discrediting the artist, but they don't recognize that it's challenging. It's very challenging to be Okay, hang on a second, B. Just 5 more minutes.
She can join us.
Oh, B, you want to say hi? Come on.
Ah, there we go. B is officially our number. She's officially a part of the AFD show, so we appreciate it.
But it can be very challenging. I mean, there would be the same conversations I think that they have with people that win the lottery, and somebody comes out and says, "Listen, you're gonna be hit up by a bunch of people, and and it's gonna be challenging, and people are gonna challenge your values on what's important to you, and you're a bad person if you don't do whatever." It's the same sort of thing. So, Chester was out a long time, and I think he probably had enough support as anybody if he asked for it. Mm-hmm. But I think mental health issues, whether it's depression or bipolar disorder or any mood disorders, take a toll on artists who are particularly more sensitive to, especially singers, I would say, especially more sensitive to life. And people do hasty things when life becomes too stressful and too heavy, and
that's just crazy. His single was called Heavy. His last single we put out. Then do you have any, I guess, again, for someone who's been on both sides of it, advice for upcoming artists? Because I just see, again, bringing it, of course, this is a Guns N' Roses podcast, but you'll see articles like Blabbermouth, which is just a cesspool of garbage trolls on there, talking about, because updates about what's going on with Chester and his family. and you'll see somebody like you comment, I hope Axl Rose is next. I hope Corey Taylor's next. I mean, it's disgusting. So it's hard for someone to be in Chester's, his position or Axl's position to tune out all that noise. So I don't know, maybe that's what Axl had been doing when he kind of was Howard Hughes for a while. So I don't know if you have advice for an up-and-coming musician, because it's really hard to tune those voices out, not just in your head, but in social media today.
I mean, I guess the advice would be to find people and stay open to people that you trust, that will tell you, give you the truth, and and not some sycophant or, yes men around you, because there's tons of those when you make it. Mm-hmm. But what you need confidants and people that will sort of call you on your shit. And you need to keep them around. You need to keep them close to you. Because you will hear, listen, I've never been elevated to that level that they were, but, having known people throughout the years, it comes on pretty quick, and it's pretty intoxicating to kind of get whatever you want whenever you want, and then nobody says boo to you. Good therapy is good as well. I mean, I work with a lot of musicians. There's a great program here in Los Angeles called Music Cares, and they help musicians that may not have funds for treatment, and they help them get into treatment. I've been lucky enough to work with that company a couple times with some of their clients, and I'm very, it's more places like that are needed as well.
I believe Dave Kushner spoke about Music Cares, and Slash has done some work with them as well. Yeah,
that's likely. A lot of they're pretty connected to, and they get a lot of support from some of the music industry's outwardly open, alcoholics and addicts, or people affected by alcoholism and addiction. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, they're a good company. I'm not plugging them, but I didn't come on to plug them. But
wherever like can help somebody.
Things like that definitely. Things like that really do help.
Gotcha.
Therapy is good.
Oh yeah.
I want to get back into the formation of U.P.O. because we just kind of briefly touched on it. So we were listening to U.P.O. before we recorded. Very different sound from Guns N' Roses, and a little bit more indicative of what was going on at that time. So how did the band get formed, and also how did you come to the conclusion of this is what we want to sound like, and we want to, have a departure of what I've done in the past?
Well, I was friends with Sean Albro, the singer for U.P.O, since I was in my early 20s, and I'd always had a great relationship, just a friendship with him. I moved to England probably in 1992, and he had come and visited me there, and he took a trip around Europe doing that too, and just stayed close. And when I decided to, after six years, return to Los Angeles, I was talking to him, and he said, "Listen, when you come back?" He wasn't in a band at the time, and he'd been in bands all his life. And I just said, "I'm going to move back," and I moved back and came back to LA, and he and I started writing immediately. Trapped in a small room with a guitar and a 4-track and a drum machine. And within a short period of time, had written a couple songs that were, I thought, really good. Where I didn't intend on having a particular sound, but I was listening to bands that probably sounded a little bit more like that at the time, so it might have influenced me. You can't help it when certain music hits you in a particular way.
Of course.
I can see, and I know a lot of people that write music based on what the trend is. I don't think it was the trend. I was listening to stuff that I thought was really great, and it kind of just really resonated with me. A lot of dark tones and a lot, so, mind you, if I could have written, any Aerosmith Rocks or something like that, I would, that would have been my dream, to kind of write a record like that.
Well, I think every band would like to write an Aerosmith Rocks. It's one of the best albums of all time.
Yeah, Rock, Poison the Attic, or Rock in a Hard Place. I have to say...
Oh, Rock in a Hard Place. Okay, I thought you were saying Rocks, because I love Rocks.
Well, no, I was saying Rocks.
Got you.
Rock in a Hard Place, I think, is one of the most underrated records of all time. And people will tell me I'm full of, full of crap for saying that, but it really hits me. I think Jimmy Crespo did a great job on that, and I love Joe Perry, but I think Crespo was awesome. And I think the riffs are fantastic. If anybody hasn't heard it in a while, or if you've never heard it, go listen to that record. Anyway, so Sean, so I came out, and Sean and I, wrote a lot of songs, put together a band, started playing shows out here in Hollywood, some of the same venues that I played with Hollywood Rose. And our tape, Vicki Hamilton, who's a
former guest on the show.
Obviously
Former guest on the show. We've had Vicki on.
Right. Vicki Hamilton put us in, and we did some demos. And she was working for, I can't remember who she was working for at the time. It'll come to me. Columbia, maybe?
She's worked with, because I know she also worked, I thought you meant band, because I know she was with Faster Pussycat for a while.
No. She was working at a music company at the time.
Oh, okay, understood.
Anyway, so we did a demo for her, and they used, in that demo, got on the desk of somebody, that's Steve Richards that I had mentioned, and real quickly we got a deal. I think probably one of the last real sort of old school record deals that I at least heard of for a long time. It's now much more. People are promoting through the internet a lot more, but this was really sort of like, I got a tape in my hand, I'm going to sign you guys to a deal type of. And then the band did a couple records with Rick Perisher, who did Pearl Jam 10. He produced that record, and he produced some stuff for Alice in Chains, and a lot of that Seattle sound was as a result of his work in his studio, London Bridge.
And that's a pretty heavy hitter to have doing your first album.
Yeah, we got really lucky. We had a pretty good deal, and we could pick from a lot of great producers that were out there. And we met with a lot of the guys that were sort of making good records at the time. We just sort of liked Rick and liked the music that he created. So we went with Rick, did that record. Soon after the single was released, Godless, we were on the road. I think we went out with Creed. They stuck us on tour with Creed, and Creed was playing stadiums. So we were like, or arenas, sorry. So we were more than happy to kind of step into something where we're playing to 7,000, 8,000, 13,000 people a night.
Nice.
Yeah. And then the radio really took to Godless, and it went to number 3, and which was, I think, on the modern rock charts. Mm-hmm. And we were up there we did a lot of touring with, and a lot of festivals with bands like Deftones had released White Pony at the time, and that was really big.
Favorite band of mine.
Perfect Circle came out, and that song Judith was released about the same time. So that was our competition back then. And so we were in really great company. And, toured all of 2000, went out with a Cult for a long time. It was good. And then I had mentioned earlier I sort of hit the bricks a little bit, and then kind of remerged, did the second record, and that's where I changed careers.
Gotcha. Before, because I know you got to attend to Beatrice, who is way more important than us. Because I know we briefly skipped over it, but I didn't know if there was a story there or if it's just you auditioned or what. But what happened when you auditioned for Poison? That just sounds. Was it like American Idol, and you could see CeCe and Ricky and Brett just standing like, oh, I like this. No, dog, I wasn't feeling it. So what was the audition process like for Poison?
Well, CeCe wasn't in the band yet.
Well, that's right. You were going to fill CeCe's would-be spot. Yeah. Correct. Right.
I think their guitar player's name was Matt, if I remember right, and they had all come out from Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. I think that's where they're from. You guys know maybe better.
Yeah, they are.
But anyway, they're in kind of a working town type of thing. But anyway, blue-collar town. And Matt, I think, I don't know firsthand, but I think he needed to go back. He just wanted to go back, and I think maybe he had a child or something that he wanted.
Yeah,
to
his wife was
pregnant. Life out there.
Flash mentioned that.
Yeah, and so they were looking for somebody else. I went to meet him. My experience with them is just going to their apartment in Hollywood. I think they were all there, which is Ricky and Brett and Bobby. Mm-hmm. I hung out. I think I had a guitar. There was an acoustic there. Me and Bobby played a little bit, and then Brett was kind of standing over us, and just talked for a while, and that was it. That was my audition.
Was there a dress code? Did you have to go in there and fishnets and eyeliner?
To be honest with you, I look Cece's shorter than me, but it's I had that same look back then, that big long white hair straight up to the ceiling.
Have your kids seen the pictures of you back then?
I think my older one has. She says, "That's not you."
When were you mommy, Daddy? When were you mommy?
By the way, Chris, I know that you have your daughter in the background. If you have to jump at any time and wrap it up with us, you can let us know. But I do have a couple more questions that we can hopefully
keep going.
All right, I appreciate it. So one of them being, I was just wondering if when you were on the road with U.P.O, were there any, rock nerds that did their research and were like, oh, this was the original guitarist who worked with Axl Rose and wrote songs on Appetite for Destruction? Like, did any fans ever come up to you with a vinyl of Appetite and ask you to sign it or anything like that?
I didn't. I don't remember that happening at all, except for in some of the radio stations. I remember when U.P.O did a lot of morning radio. I mean, across the country, that there are, early in the morning there'll be some band that's on that's talking with whoever the rock jock is at the day, and you have to remember that these guys have probably played a gig until probably 10 or 11 at night, gone and partied till 2 in the morning, and then their crew gets them up. To do this radio thing at 7, so they're not that fresh.
And then talking to wacky DJs, hey, Z Morning Zoo, yeah, and that's annoying. Mm-hmm.
Right. But that's how you and because Sean's voice was always so good, we would always play Godless, live at the time, so that was fine. But anyways, on a couple of occasions when I went to the radio station, some of those people had done some of the research, and those people would mention, hey, aren't you, or we know that you're this is your previous band. I don't know how many autographs I did for that particular band, but I don't, but they did mention. That's the only time I'd ever heard it from anybody.
Have you ever had any awkward moments where you're telling people, they're talking about Appetite for Destruction, you're like, hey, I wrote one of the songs on there, and has anyone been like, you're full of shit, you didn't write a song on Appetite for Destruction? Because it sounds like a pretty bold claim.
Right. Honestly, there was when I was living in Minneapolis for about a year, where I was lucky enough to work at Paisley Park. Did a demo at Paisley Park. Oh wow!
So that's where the late Prince lived.
Yeah, and I met him, but that.
Oh wow!
It doesn't matter. So, but
it matters. Meeting Prince is a big deal.
We talked about Prince on the show.
Yeah, no, he was nice. I mean, he gave me the time for free.
That's that's awesome.
Because that was the tape that I was doing that got me my publishing deal with Geffen for the Guns N' Roses money. So he signed on to that idea of sort of helping me create that. And this is when he was doing the Love Sexy tour, so he had a stage set up in his thing. But in any case, so it was the only time that anybody ever sort of called me, said bullshit on me is, and this is back before the internet, was I was trying to make ends meet, so I was trying to give guitar lessons, and in the guitar somebody had advertised for me trying to get me guitar lessons, and had said that I had been a member of Guns N' Roses, which wasn't exactly accurate, but it was close enough to kind of what the idea would have been. In any case,
you would embellish a resume. It's the same thing.
Right, and I certainly didn't do it because I'm not that kind of person. You probably ask John, but and so when somebody got on the phone, and I thought they were going to be a new client or and then they said bullshit. So whether it's because it's just my disposition, and I'd like to say humility, but maybe it's just embarrassment. I don't tell people. People find out, and certainly with Google now, and much more people know, and nobody questions it because you can kind of look. A lot of people go like, hey, that I work with, hey, I didn't know you had a Wikipedia page. It's like, oh. Okay.
I just think the whole idea of having to call bullshit on or you having to call bullshit on them and say, no, I really did this is kind of funny. And it's making me think of something. By any chance, have any of you guys seen the documentary on Quiet Riot?
No,
I have not.
I haven't.
It's a great documentary, but there's such a cringeworthy moment where their drummer who
Frankie?
drummed on, I might be wrong with which member it was. It wasn't Frankie, but there was a guy who played something on the original album, but he's not on the cover. And he's touring with the band now, or at least was at the time of the documentary. And they're doing a signing, and he has Frankie sign it. And just a random fan, and the guy who played on the album but isn't on the cover goes, "Hey, do you want me to sign it as well?" And the fan goes, "No, you weren't on the album." And he's like, "No, look at the credits, dude. I played whatever it was on this song." And he's like, "No, you didn't." He's like, dude, look at the credits, right? And it's just such a cringeworthy moment of him trying to convince this fan that he played on the album, and it's almost kind of embarrassing. So it made me think if you ever had one of those scenarios where you're like, hey, you want me to sign Appetite for Destruction? No, you didn't have anything to do with that album. Yeah, I did.
Well,
right. Yeah.
Well, Chris, I like the fact that you said whether it's humble, because I have the same kind of personality where it's not like you're going around wearing a T-shirt, say, ask me about Appetite for Destruction, and you're telling people, or how a lot of people saw Steven Adler for many years, where it's just he's talking about, obviously he was the drummer on that record, but he just kept talking about it and wouldn't seem to let go. Now that could be argued whether he can really let go because he wants to be the full-time drummer. So your feelings on it are actually pretty refreshing, because you'll hear from the original Iron Maiden singer, the original AC/DC singer, and there might be some bitterness still there. So you seem to have a very healthy attitude, and you have the resume to back it up anyway. So you should feel nothing but good vibes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not by design. I just kind of, or maybe it is. I can't remember how that phrase is used, but I'm not trying to do it. It's just kind of like that's just me. I get embarrassed when there's undue influence by something that I've done that people may have more of a feeling towards than I regard. So I don't see it as that big of a deal. Hang on, 5 more minutes. Because I don't see it as that big of a deal, and maybe that's just what I need to do in order to not have any resentment. I don't know.
I agree. I mean, we see it as a big deal as fans. I got to ask one last thing before we wrap up here, just at least my last question I want to get to. And you don't have to be specific on this. I know this is a personal thing, but a lot of fans probably wonder, your name is on Anything Goes on Appetite for Destruction. The album has sold tens of millions of albums worldwide. You still are a part of those royalties. What type of royalties do you see from that album?
Not as much as I would like.
That's a fair
Good
response.
answer.
That's a fair response. I like it.
I put it this way: I work for a living, and and I work hard to pay for my family in the work that I do now. So any monies that I've gotten from that have really already happened, been wasted, been taken, or appropriated by other people, or just never gotten. That is kind of a sore spot, but it's not sore in the fact that I have feelings about it. It's not really a windfall like people would think. What is good about it, and this is worth well more than any money that I ever got, was the fact that that my name connected with something that was so meaningful to people that it's allowed me to do a couple things in my life that I wouldn't have had an opportunity to do by people that are fans of the band, and that's worth way more to me than any financial gains that I might have had.
Right on.
That's awesome. Do you have anything you want to get out there now? I know you're a working therapist. I don't know if you want to put out a number or where people can contact you. I don't know if you're actually working on music as well. Is there anything you want to get out to our audience that we may not have touched on?
No, I'm working at I'm sure my employer, I'm working at the Hills. It's a treatment program in Los Angeles. If you need those services, I work there. So if you'd like to work with me, you're welcome to call them and ask them to about their program. But that's where I work, and I want to give a lot of credit to John for his passion. Really admire that, and having done what he's done for so long, and still trying as hard as he was in the very beginning, like on a daily basis.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I was thinking when you're talking about people approaching you about who you were and all that, with the way information is available now, I mean, I feel like so many people know about you, and this is, it was 7 years ago when I first reached out to you. I was getting that through books and stuff I was reading, and through MySpace. I don't know if you remember. That's how I reached out to you. And I was a little cautious. I didn't want to be as obvious about what I was doing. And I was saying, I'm writing this movie on the glam scene, and I think you caught on pretty quick, what I was focusing on, and I think I showed up at times a little too wired on caffeine, and I appreciate you sticking with me. And it's been years, and now you're a buddy of mine. Yeah, I come out to L.A. when going a long run around the city together, and it's great, man. I mean, it's been fantastic support. So, great thing for me.
That's awesome.
Good. Yeah.
Chris and John frolicking in the fields together.
Yeah. So I've gotten a lot of riches from this, and it hasn't been financially. So
that's cool.
Anyways, thanks for putting up with my kids in the background.
Oh no, we appreciate it, man. You know what? As we're wrapping this up,
thanks for putting up with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was just thinking, real quick, any contact with the guys in Guns N' Roses still, and also
thoughts on the reunion.
How do you feel about the reunion? Yeah, without Izzy, because he's such a crucial part of that band.
And I know you got to go, so you can keep it brief if you'd like.
I don't contact anybody anymore. Last person I talked to was probably Steven, and that's a number of years now. And I saw Slash when we did a book signing together for Mark Cantor's book. But in regards to the Izzy thing, I didn't, personally, I had, problems when, Steven wasn't in the band and it was Matt Sorum, and then the addition of, the other guys, Dizzy, and they're all great guys probably, but, I'm a kind of a purist when it comes to that. I always like that story that Ron Wood tells. Ron Wood is, he's been in the Stones for 45 years now, and they still call him the new guy.
Right, yeah.
So it's like that sort of. It isn't really Guns N' Roses without Izzy. I don't know why he's not doing it, and if it has anything to do with them not paying him enough, I think that's bullshit because they should figure out a way to make that happen. But Izzy's that type of guy that if he doesn't want something, he's not. Can't pull him in with financial gains. He was principled. I don't hang out with him anymore, but he has his own way of life. As a matter of fact, that's why I'm even part of this band, is because Izzy was that person. If he was just some schmuck off the street that had an idea for a band and wanted in rehearsal space, I would never have done it.
Let me ask, with that being a purist, because of course that's been a topic that we've covered throughout our whole tenure doing this podcast, because Gilby replaced Izzy, and Gilby did some mixes on the Hollywood Rose release a few years ago. So how do you feel about that? How do you feel about Gilby doing that? Did you work together with him on that?
I didn't work with Gilby on it, and for some reason that's the anomaly to my feeling, because I do feel that Gilby has put in enough time with the original stuff. It may also be because Gilby was part of the bands that were here in Los Angeles at the time. We played a show at Madame Wong's West when his band Candy was playing, so maybe that there's something of that sort of changes my mind a little bit, that Gilby participating. But I really think that, you need to get Izzy and Steven in it to kind of have that original, if you're going to call it original.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise you can't really call it original.
I got you.
So, for what it's worth.
A lot of people agree with you. I would say the majority, even though the tour has been successful, but a lot of people, I mean, we've been waiting for like just at least another one-off. I mean, they did it with Steven, but we've been waiting with Izzy. I mean, we're hoping it happens.
Yeah, I do too.
I keep wondering if I'm in Izzy's hometown right now. I'm not his current home, but I don't know if he lives here or not. But I hear he does. So I'm in Lafayette. I don't know if I told you that, Chris, or not. But,
yeah, I saw it in your text.
Right. So I'm going to this place called McGuire Music, which is like the local, I don't know, like it's the spot where everyone goes and gets their stuff. And he shows up on occasion. I'm not thinking I'm going to run into him, but I come here and I wonder, is he in town?
Is Izzy in town?
Right.
Well, while John continues to stalk Jeff,
he's not Art Tavana. No, I'm just joking. We love Art.
But no, we'll let you go, Chris. I mean, this was truly an honor. We've been talking about interviewing you ever since we met John, and he said he was connected with you. And I just recently watched the documentary and read some stuff up about you. So it's just awesome to talk to you and all the wonderful work that you're doing now, which is just awesome to hear.
Thanks for that acknowledgement. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, man.
So tell Beatrice, we apologize to her for us, and wherever she wants to do, if you're going to Chuck E. Cheese or whatever, have fun. And if you were ever in New York, I will ask you to sign my Appetite for Destruction CD.
Oh, that would be an honor.
Awesome. Well, hopefully it happens, or we go out to L.A. with John one day. But regardless, hopefully this is not the last time we speak.
Well, if I'm with John, we got our running shoes on and we're running in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So we fall over.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm handicapped, so I'll get some like rocker-powered wheelchair or something like that.
Okay.
All right, Chris. Thank you.
You'll be the pace setter.
Right. Yes, that's what I'll be like. The when they were dog racing, I'll be like the follow bunny, whatever, the lead bunny. Well, I'm really self-deprecating right now. This is why I'm in therapy.
Guys.
Thank you, Chris, so much.
Man.
Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys.
Take care.
Bye now.
Later.
Well, I totally fanboyed out there. I got to be honest.
That's cool.
Yeah. Oh man.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John, for making it happen.
Hey, thank you. I mean, listen, thanks to Chris. I mean, that was the coolest thing ever, man.
Yeah, it's so funny because you want to hold it back and you're just having a conversation with the guy on the show, but when you hear all that rich history and the fact that you get to speak with the guy, that's one of those things that's priceless to me, that I get to talk to a guy who really is just so crucial in the formation of what we would all probably call the greatest rock and roll band of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could argue that, if they met another guitarist, GNR may or may not have happened, but whatever. He was the guy that they needed, and, they wrote those songs. I mean, can you imagine? All right, you're talking about hearing him. What about when I saw him in person? Like, here I am 7 years ago, I walked from, my buddy dropped me off. I walked down Santa Monica. I met him at this coffee shop. All of a sudden, I turn around. There's Chris Webber. He's standing right there. He's got sleeve tattoos, and I'm like, this is the guy that played with my heroes. It was surreal. And so, the more and more I've hung out with him, I'm like, this is just, it gets more and more familiar and cool. So.
See, I think that's cool, John and Ian. As you know, it's been a longer journey for you, John, with working on your Young Axl documentary.
It's not a documentary. Remember?
It's a film.
It's a narrative. Movie. I mean, it's and it's. I can't say it's 100% accurate right now because I have not talked to the man. Right. I want it to be right. So, but I do have a complete script. It's gone through 1 million. Anyway.
Script. No, forgive me. I want to get it right. I mean, you've told me about it. I don't know why I said documentary. I'm a piece of shit.
It's all right. I mean,
So my thought was, in the year plus that Ian and I have done this podcast, we've met some really cool people, and that's what you've been doing. And I texted Dave Kushner right after. It was like maybe a few hours after I read the news about Chester, because in that episode, which I know about, that he is in this like jam band with Chester, and I think with Matt Sorum as well. And so I know they've worked together. So I shot him a text and just basically said, and that's why I think it was also funny, John, that you said, Chris didn't know who you were. After he's like, he lost your number. So I really, so I thought that was the same thing that was going to happen with Dave Kushner. So I even said, like, hey, Dave, it's Brando from the GNR podcast. I just want to send my condolences about Chester, that we spoke about him. I guess hope all is well. And he said, thanks, man. I appreciate you reaching out. And that was it. So
which just has to be so hard because you were in a band with Scott Weiland, and then
I know
you're kind of rising from the ashes of that, forming a new thing with Chester. And it's just so weird how Chris Cornell, Scott Weiland, and Chester, they all have ties to GNR. Mm-hmm. All three of these guys.
So that's why it's important. And we talk about all these, these bands, the web that we've, the GNR universe creates. But again, it's just, it's interesting that, I'm not going to be silly, overblow. I joke that I'm Dave Kushner's friend. We're BFFs. Obviously not, but he still has, I have Dave Kushner's cell number. I also have Keith Sweats, but that's another story. But then you have Chris Webber's, obviously, and it's just cool that these players that we're meeting of this band that we all grew up with loving, that we're now kind of very fringely, if that's a word, kind of being swept into that web with people that that we're meeting. So it's just very cool. It's very cool what this band is bringing to all of us. So with that though, with John, because we're not going to keep you on too long. I want the update with your movie. What's going on? Because you're on location right now. So what are you up to?
Well, I'm only here because I'm visiting friends that I've made through my project. I'm on my way back from St. Louis, and it just, I love coming here. I guess I've been here 5 or 6 times, and the first time I came here, it was a different world because I'd never even been in the state of Indiana. But now I come to Lafayette. I mean, I know my way around really well, and I like seeing it. And I just feel like the more I'm here, I get more familiar with it. And also, it helps when you write to like have exact visuals in front of you. And but that's really it. Just seeing a couple people, dropping some stuff off that I brought from New York. And I was planning on driving up to Minneapolis for the show tomorrow night. It's only 9 hours from here. But then if I go from Minneapolis to New York, that's 19 hours back. And my 1990 Volvo is AC less, so I ride with the windows down.
Brutal.
And I just don't think I can do 19 hours in the car. So I sold my ticket. I'm not going to make it, fortunately. But
where's your wife during all this? Are you still married? Like she's just letting you again just travel around like the Grateful Dead with GNR?
She it's a miracle.
Sorry.
One time I said she deserves the Patience Award. I mean, we got a dog 4 months ago, and actually got it through one of my GNR friends who posts all these great sites of dog rescues in California and New York and Texas, and this little Chihuahua Terrier popped up one day, and we were looking for a dog, and she occupies our life. Mm-hmm. So anyway, my wife
did the dog get a GNR related name? I can see you doing that.
I considered calling her Rocket, because she's fast as hell. But I thought if my wife knows that it's a GNR name, so.
Well,
wait, what name? I want to know what name we went with.
Oh yeah, what name?
It's nothing. Her name is Val, Val.
Okay.
Val. She sounds like a stripper.
It's short for Valenciana because she's a Chihuahua. It's a little town in Mexico.
That's cool.
Okay, because Duff just tweeted a picture that he and his wife just got a dog. So I was hoping
because their dog Buckley, Axl announced this in the show the other night that Buckley died.
Yeah.
As the band arrived.
Oh man.
And Buckley's been around for a long time.
Wasn't that his Twitter avatar for a while, right?
I don't know about that.
I think it was a dog. I mean, it was a dog.
Axl has a dog, but it's Betta's dog. It's a French poodle.
Maybe
but
that's
I don't know about Duff's.
Oh, because I was thinking, and I was hoping he would comment or acknowledge it. I was like, is the name Ruff McKagan? Okay,
No, I
maybe
mean,
not.
But if you read his books, and I believe this is the dog, Buckley was with him, or at least around the birth of his children. You know, so this dog's been around for serious times with him. I don't know if when he was going through his extremely serious health issue when he had his pancreas burst. That was 20 years ago. It's not a 20-year-old dog, but anyway, Buckley was very close to them, and Buckley passed away, unfortunately, and they dedicated Heaven's Door to him. It was a nice moment.
Oh.
So we're wrapping things up here, but there was one last piece of kind of GNR news that people were talking about that I wanted to throw out there.
But is there any other, before we get to that, there's no more updates though? Because I know you're also working on like, I know you said it's not a documentary, but like the making of the movie you're trying.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm writing that. I mean, it's a book. I got a lot. I've been doing it off and on for about 3 years, and I got a lot written. It's just sort of extremely disorganized or unorganized, and but I say that I don't have the ending yet, so
when it's right, it's right. You'll find your rosebud.
Right. But that's about. I mean, in terms of the movie, it's all about licensing and permissions and stuff, because that's no one's going to produce a movie if there's any kind of legal risks. You got to make
I'm sure you thought about it, like a short, and maybe do like one of those.
I always recommended that. There's this one writer that actually from Indiana wrote this great article about Axl in 2006. His name was John Jeremiah Sullivan, and I contacted him back then to help me reach somebody, and he said, you know what you got to do? You got to be really creative. You got to go back to Lafayette and shoot a short there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's a fantastic idea. I mean, if I had the money, it's all about it all comes down to money and doing, because you want to do it right. You don't want to make an asshole movie, because I've made some shit shorts in the past, and people have let me know that I should have.
Well, you just never know in today's crowdfunding or whatever. People
that's
just usually. I mean, you have like rich people. Like I think Spike Lee wants his fucking new movie funded.
Yeah,
he doesn't have the fucking money.
Like that. No, that's true.
Insane.
Which it's cool if they have some cool rewards. I get that. But anyway, the last piece of I guess you would say news in the GNR world, and that people have been talking about. So there was this limited run of a Sirius XM Guns N' Roses channel, which I believe is still on. They did in honor of the 30th anniversary of Appetite, as well as the show at the Apollo. And people were like, I wonder if they're ever going to play 1 in a Million. And sure enough, 1 in a Million is on the playlist. They've been playing it on the channel, completely uncensored.
Oh, I thought you meant, when you said playlist, I'm hearing set list.
No, not live or anything.
Right.
You thought the same thing when I said this to you, Brando.
No, just because, because...
they're never going to play it again live, I don't think. But
we talked about that on the show, because I love that tune. We've talked about the lyrics and stuff, but the fact that Sirius is playing it is very interesting.
And what surprised me is, I worked for Sirius XM. Sirius XM is a very politically progressive company. They are pretty cautious about anything that could be perceived as racist or homophobic or anything like that. I never would think...
They fired Anthony Cumia when he wasn't even on the air with it.
Yeah, and it's not like it's a crucial song to play. This isn't like saying, we're not going to play Welcome to the Jungle or something. Right. So I'm just really surprised that they decided to play 1 in a Million on a platform that reaches tens of millions.
Well, I am a little... I don't know. I mean, I don't know if, what say so the band has in terms of, what they'll play.
Well, I know, so not to interrupt, but I know Duff had like his own part of the channel once. Like he had like a punk show. He's like, things that influenced me. So I know they have some say, but maybe not the generic playlist.
But I would think if they said, hey, we don't want 1 in a Million played on the channel,
then their
word would go. So, I mean, they definitely don't have a problem with it.
I don't know the PD over there that would make that decision.
I don't know. Well, I mean, whatever.
Maybe
I love that song.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great song. I think it's cool. I'm surprised. I was surprised when and a lot of people And a lot of people in that fan group on Facebook were surprised.
In today's climate, too. I mean, the fans, we're happy, but in today's climate, if you're not that big of a Guns N' Roses fan and, you're a Sirius XM subscriber, you shouldn't be. You should be on iHeart. But if you hear that song maybe for the first time, that could very well be... That's a song somebody can hear for the first time in 2017. That is true.
Not to mention, we've talked about this before, but the trend of people wearing old band T-shirts that they might listen to or might not listen to. If you walk around New York City, it's pretty often I do see young black kids wearing Guns N' Roses shirts.
Oh, they're huge.
And it is all over Brooklyn. I mean,
it's a big part.
Girls, it's everyone.
I think it's a big part of that skateboard culture because you see those same kids wearing the Thrasher shirts and everything.
I'll see preppy, and I'll see girls like Jappy kind of, and I say that as a Jew. So I'm sorry if that's a slur, but I'm using my own slur. To wear studded GNR tank tops. Like when I went to see GNR last year with my friends and my brother, my friend's wife wore it was like a pink GNR logo and it was all studded. It was pretty badass.
Yeah.
But
anyway, my point being, I don't know if all these kids, especially black kids in particular, are into Guns N' Roses. But let's say they're wearing the shirt. They happen to tune into Sirius XM and hear the Guns N' Roses channel, and they hear Axl using the N-word. It would probably turn them off from wanting to display that band's shirt. So it's a controversial move.
Yeah. I mean, I always want to get into it with people to explain a way to perceive the song, not only that it was written 30 years ago and, the times have changed and attitudes, but also you can't look at the song as like a personal confession. I think we've even talked about this on the show that, this is a story that was told and, it was done effectively because, Axl sings with, totally connected passion. But these aren't necessarily thoughts and feelings that he had. He might have been recognizing things. I don't know, but whatever.
But there's enough interviews with Axl from back then talking about it. And I think I've used the analogy, how can you have Tom Sawyer, the book, not the Rush song, without the N-word in it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's certain artistic licenses. He's not, he was not like where, today's hip hop where it's just you're overwhelmed with the N-word and things like that.
But it's not the hard ER. There's a
that's
difference.
Semantics.
I would say there's a difference. But
white people usually say that.
I think a lot of black people would say that there's a huge difference, man. I think the ER and the A.
Not only that, it's like what Ice Cube said to
Bill Maher.
Bill Maher, he goes, that was y'all's word. You can't have it back. It's ours now.
Yeah. So
I like that.
And times have changed, but that word will always be offensive in America. Other parts of the song, you could say, it's a different part of the culture. It even reminds me of...
even the gay slur, because you always focus,
I was going to say, if you watch Motley Crue, Welcome to the Videos, this is actually pretty interesting, and a lot of you might not know this. If you watch the Dr. Feelgood video, there's a sign in a window that says no bags. And you're like, why is there a sign that says no bags? Not Welcome to the Videos. I'm sorry. I'm saying Motley Crue's, whatever it's called, the video documentary. So it's their version of Welcome to the Videos. So if you listen to the commentary, Nikki Sixx says that sign in the window originally said no fags. And MTV said, we're not going to put that on. And they had to go frame by frame and make it look like a B. And Nikki Sixx clarifies. He goes, for us, no fags means no wimps, no complainers. He was like, that's, we don't mean anything against gays. And keep in mind, this is late 1980s, and it was just more acceptable at the time. And times do change, and we change our language and our culture.
I was just watching a video this morning. I don't know how much of a wrestling fan you are, John, but it was an old video of
huge
D-Generation X. It was DX with Hunter and Shawn Michaels and the late China. And they were saying that the words that they can't say on TV because it was unedited, so it must have been on like some DX video when he used the word, the F word. I know we're on a podcast, I just don't want to feel like saying it, but the same word that Dire Straits uses, the same word that was in 1 in a Million, that Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who's now like, the COO of WWE, there's video of him, in a bit using that word, and that's not that long ago. So it's interesting that Sirius made that choice. So good to discuss that. Anything else, my dear Ian? Because I know this has been a long ass episode.
How could you not go along with Chris Weber?
Oh, of course not. And John Miller. I mean, I think the one, John, you were my first co-host when Ian was out, and I think just without even trying, we did a 2-hour episode.
Yeah. Well, the time y'all first had me on, we went over 2 hours.
Yeah.
And we tried to hold it back the second time around, but
people like the long podcasts, man. I mean, look at Joe Rogan. He goes like 3 hours sometimes.
Yeah,
but I don't mind.
We're not
man.
Joe Rogan.
I listened. I'll tell you this, man. I listened yesterday to the whole 3-hour podcast with Dorian Yates that Joe Rogan did, and I was glued to it. I thought it was excellent.
No, people do, and I just want to say, in addition to say thank you, John, not just for being on the show, because we were hoping to have you in, but obviously you're on location in Lafayette. But just I want to say thanks to some people that are, I guess, listening, and people that are always just chiming in. I know Anna from Portugal, we played, her review.
She's awesome, yeah.
She chimed in. Sir Kev Pryor Esquire, he's in a band and has a guitar shop over in Ireland. We're always hearing from him. We always get, we're always meeting, over the internet. It sounds so creepy. Some wonderful people. So, John, I wanted to make sure, in addition to saying thank you, that we do read, all the messages that you send us as well. So, we tried. We knew this episode was going to go long. We did know that. But
no one's complaining, man. They definitely love it.
But I do, in addition to those, another friend that I know listens to these episodes is my friend John, a.k.a. Stud, that I went to Hofstra with him. And I know, I don't think you would know him.
No.
But he's listened to episodes. He's like, oh, this is like a 2-hour episode. He's like, all right, now I got to listen to it, 3 days at work. They spread it over. So I have friends that are breaking up the podcast when it is a longer episode. And I guess that's how it works. So there's plenty of content here between John. Are you having like an orgy? What's going on? Are you in IKEA? What are you doing? Oh, okay.
I'm in a stairwell of a hotel bed.
Okay, because it's one thing if, we have Chris Weber's little girl, Beatrice, but I don't know if you're in IKEA and you're making some sort of like fucking couch right now.
Yeah, and Chris Weber can get away with that. He's an A-list guest.
Yeah,
you're like a D-list guest.
Yeah, it's all right.
Well, we'll let you go as you're sitting awkwardly in a stairwell. And please keep us up to date in everything that you're doing. We'll obviously keep following you and talking because we're all buddies and best friends off the air anyway.
We're the 3 best friends that anyone could have. We're the 3 best friends that anyone can have. And we'll never, ever, 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 ever leave each other.
Twitter at the AFD Show. Facebook, just look up Appetite for Distortion with Brando and Scotto, motherfuckers.
Yeah, and I won't give out John's information because last time he's like...
give out his phone number.
No, I think when I first asked John, how do we contact you? He's like, just look up John Miller.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because that's going to work at the fucking internet. Just type in John Miller. So if anything that John is updating us, we'll update it through our AFD pages. So as far as the next episode...
what? Reaching out to Tracy Guns, going to try to get him on, hopefully, because they're going to come to New York. If we can get him in studio, it'd be awesome. And Butcher Baby's on tour with Hollywood Undead, so hopefully we get Carl Harvey in studio. So those are future episodes I'm trying
Mark
to get
Slaughter,
into.
Right?
Mark Slaughter would be cool.
And also, as I mentioned, I got Kevin in Ireland, and I just want to acknowledge that we're not forgetting about you.
I know we always say Russ TCB. We got to bring back on. It's so much, man.
He said he's writing a book, this guy Kevin over there, and he listens to our podcast in his guitar shop over there. So that's pretty cool. So I mean, we definitely want to get meet you. The listeners, the GNR fans who have great stories. I read a lot of these awesome stories you guys share, especially on that fan spot page on Facebook. So we definitely want to hear from you in addition to some of the bigger names that we get. So if you have any ideas, thoughts, hey, I have this great GNR story I want to tell you, please feel free to message us and we'll make it happen. So as far as the next episode, unless there's anything else, my dear Ian.
No, just it'll be after the fact, but I'm hoping John Jones beats Daniel Cormier tonight.
Okay. And anything else you want to share?
That's it. That's all. Unless there's anything you want to share, John.
Yeah. Anything else, John?
No. Everything's great. I was thinking I could. I'll send an email to Tracy Gunn. See what he says.
Oh, that would be awesome, dude. I would love to get Tracy on the show. Just so much history there, man, between LA Guns and, old LA Guns, and then Brides of Destruction, which I got to see them for their pretty short lifespan. Tracy's a great guitarist, man.
Well, what's always great,
Dude,
though. God.
He let me shoot. He let me film one of their shows about 5 years ago.
Nice.
It was like, I always say, it was my... what's the Led Zeppelin movie, Into the Outdoor, or Song Remains the Same?
Yes.
My Song Remains the Same moment, getting to shoot him close up. And he's great.
And what I like about the interviews that we do, and in case in point, I think was this episode, that we find out things that we're not expecting, and that's kind of the point. Whether it be silly or serious, things we found out with Dave Cushing that was picked up, or something silly with Charlie Benanti that he watched the Walking Dead premiere on the Slayer bus. But here, I mean, I don't know if John, you knew. I mean, I guess you did know. I'm assuming that Chris auditioned for Poison.
You know what? I did not know that.
All right, so look at this.
See,
Big revelation.
I mean, I'm not surprised, because even Kevin Lawrence from Rapid Fire auditioned for Poison as well.
Oh my God!
Rest in peace, man, to Kevin Lawrence.
Sure. So
Yep.
it's very cool. So we like finding out stories in addition to the big ones we know about, getting more in depth, but these little fringe things nuggets that we find out, I think, is what makes these shows special, what makes the show special. And thanks, John, for, again, adding to this wonderful little Guns N' Roses program that we have here.
You're both way welcome. It's my pleasure.
All right, well, get home safely. And as far as the next episode of Appetite for Distortion,
The words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy. I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it.
You've been listening to the distorted minds of Brando and Scotto, dissecting all things Guns N' Roses on Appetite for Distortion. Follow the guys on Twitter at The AFD Show and on Facebook at facebook.com/The AFD Show.
Thanks to the lame ass security, I'm going home.